you have a new article out in these times, and where you're talking about basically what is happening in Appalachia with young coal miners getting black lung disease that actually is at a greater rate than previous generations of miners. How young are the miners you're talking to and you've spoken with? Like, how long have they worked in mines, and like what's happening?
So I'm 35, right? And a bunch of the guys I talked to were only a few years older than me, or younger than me, or the same age. I know of one 32-year-old in Beckley, West Virginia, who's down to about 50% of his lung capacity. The numbers are really grim because and you need to understand a little bit about the culture of this industry to really get why it's so fucked. Right now, 1 in 8 coal miners who have worked underground for 20 to 24 years has black lung. And it sounds like, okay, 20 years, that's like a veteran. But
Right.
a lot of these folks start working in the mines fresh out of high school. So a lot of people our age are now starting to deal with this horrific disease in its most advanced forms because of the situation that's progressed so badly.
Yeah. And you explain in your article about why it's worse now, and I thought it was fascinating, and it has to do with the actual chemicals that folks are breathing. Can you break that down?
Sure. When I first started digging around trying to figure out what was going on, I was talking to folks at the United Mine Workers Convention in Vegas back like a year or so ago, and I was talking to a worker at a black lung clinic about why is this happening, what's going on, and she laid it out so starkly. She told me, those Appalachian coal seams that people have been mining for centuries. You keep chipping away. Eventually, it's going to thin out. Those seams have thinned out, and now they're having to go through much more rock, and that rock contains silica, and silica is what's killing people. The way she phrased it to me was their dads and their granddads got all the good coal, and now they're left digging up the trash. And this is the reason. It's a geological issue that is turned into a public health crisis because silica is 20 times more toxic than coal dust, and coal dust ain't great.
Right. So yeah. Silica, which from the packets in your, things that you buy online that says "do not eat," that like really makes me want to eat it. So if someone tells me not to, I'm like, ugh, but you're
Don't
saying,
do it.
imagine breathing that day in and day out.
Yeah, and then eventually it gets into your lungs and it tears up the tissue and it forms these nodules and it kills you. So don't eat silica, try not to breathe it. Easier said than done. It's pretty easy for us not to breathe silica, but it's not our fucking job. For a lot of
Right.
people, it's become their job.
Now, you spoke with a miner whose doctor told them to get a lawyer, and I thought that was fascinating. And I assume it's lawyering up because the company you work for, or the mining operator you work for, has been putting you at risk. So what is the responsibility, and what has the responsibility been of these companies? Have they taken any? Are there precautions they could take that they're skirting? Do they know what's going on? They're like, here's a free Spotify account, the way Howard Schultz does.
God, that'd be nice, wouldn't it? No, I mean, and first, in terms of folks lawyering up, it's less so going after the companies because it is real hard to go after a coal company in West Virginia. It's more so figuring out how to navigate the black lung benefit system because there are some protections in place for folks that are stricken down with this horrific illness, but there's so much red tape and bureaucratic bullshit and corruption. It takes a hell of a lot to actually get those benefits they're entitled to. And a lot of guys who maybe don't have a lot of familiarity with filling out endless forms within the government bureaucracy, they need a little help. And that's where these black lung lawyers come in. But the companies absolutely know this is going on. We've known NIOSH, which is part of, there's a lot of acronyms involved. Basically, we've known since the 70s that silica is causing this problem that is really, really bad for you. And coal operators have known that silica is real bad for you. And there are also a number of safety precautions and engineering controls that can be put into place that'll keep the dust out, that'll keep the silica out. But the problem there is that it takes a little bit more time. And what is time? Time is money. And why would you stop operations and make sure that all the curtain is hung and all the water is out there, all of the variety of innovations that like safety innovations we've come up with to protect people from this? Why would you waste all that time when you could be making people work instead and make more money for you? Tale as old as time. Basically, greed leads to silica, leads to dead coal miners.
I mean, that's what I thought was really great about your piece was that, you know, you think, oh, okay, miner, black lung, they go hand in hand. What are you going to do about it? You live a short life. You know, that sort of horribly fatalistic approach. And yet there are ways that they could, you know, whether, the filters, making, going slower when it comes to mining, all these ways they could actually protect workers, and they don't. So like what failed? Like why aren't the safety regulations being actually applied here? Where does the buck stop in terms of, you know, inspections and whatnot?
So there's a few things going on here, right? We have a whole ass Mine Safety and Health Administration, part of the Department of Labor. And they're trying. They're doing what they can, but they're underfunded, they're understaffed, and they're not able to conduct as the number of mine inspections they need to be doing. They don't have as much power as I think they should have to go after coal operators and hit them with fines and make it hurt when they pull this shit.
Right.
So that's part of it, right? Like that is a big issue that's been ongoing for decades.
Right.
And it also comes down to the fact that like people can kind of get away with this shit because folks aren't really paying as much attention. You know, coal mining is a dying industry, and everyone knows that. No one is, you know, no one's pretend. People may pretend, but people know that. And so the operators are trying to push and squeeze and scrape and get as much profit of that industry as they can while they can.
Right.
That's what's pushing so much of this, you know. Right. It's they know their time is limited, so they figure, what's a few dozen, 100,000 more dead coal miners, you know, when it comes down to that much more profit.
No, yeah, and I think that's a really important point because that's the backdrop for this entire thing, right? And that's my question to you. How do you, as someone who's covered labor, you know, written about, you know, broke stories around the Bessemer, Alabama, you know, Amazon Union Drive and all of the things, when it comes to coal miners in this dying industry, you know, how do we simultaneously support their unions, support their rights, support their safety, but then also in this backdrop of like, we know that the industry is dying, like not play into a, you know, like the way the right frames it, which is, oh, you're trying to hit us with regulations. That means you're trying to kill the coal industry. It's like the coal industry is dying anyway. We're trying to help save the workers' lives who are still in it. Like, how do you situate this as a labor struggle?
I mean, to me, it feels very simple, right? These are workers. Workers deserve to be healthy and safe and well compensated. If you care about labor, if you care about the working class, if you're any type of leftist, that shouldn't be an argument, right?
Right.
You know, Amazon workers deserve just as much as oil refinery workers because under capitalism, everyone has different options, experiences, and opportunities, and we do the best we fucking can.
Right.
And in terms of the way that labor engages with this, I think there are smart ways to do it, and I think there are pig-headed ways to deal with it. I've actually been impressed with the UMWA, the Mine Workers Union, because they have been speaking very publicly about their intent to try and organize like workers in the renewable sector. Like they're interested in getting into that realm.
Oh, that's awesome.
Like they want their members to survive so they can keep making the union stronger and paying dues, all that. But also like they care, obviously.
Yeah.
The miners union, a lot of their members are retirees. They want to organize and grow. It's in their interest, in the workers' interest. And it's something that's I'm going to be following for a while, right? But there's so many other jobs in the extractive, fossil fuel, whatever industries that aren't going to be going away as soon as would behoove us living in a climate, living on a planet. But they're here for a while. Not here to stay, but they're here for a while. So we got to take care of the people doing it while not letting the companies and corporations and politicians who benefit from their suffering to get away with it and to use them as a crutch and as a photo op and as an excuse. Like, oh, well, we have to protect these jobs. There's nothing else for these people. build a fucking battery factory down there then.
Yeah.
Build some, give people an option that will pay them the same, pay them good benefits, and give them some fucking pride in their work. You're not going to teach a fourth generation coal miner in Mingo County how to code. Maybe you will. Maybe there's a couple people that are into that. But by and large, you're going to have to listen to the community and see what they actually need and want. You can't tell people your job's killing the planet, so we're willing to watch you suffer. That doesn't help anybody but the oligarchs that are sucking us all dry.
I mean, that's a really good point. And that's my question about, like, do you see, I love that the union wants to organize people in renewables. I think that's dope. And then, but what about, like, you know, we talk about this just transition in the climate movement. Like, let's transition from dirty energy to renewables, but always with that. I mean, what we need is a Green New Deal, but with that labor first approach, with that people worker first approach. Do you see opportunities like arising in between like the environmental justice and the, like, you know, the coal miners union? Is there a demand for, to lobby Manchin to do those kinds? I mean, Manchin is king of, like, you know, doing carve outs for his own personal benefit. You know what I mean? Like, can he carve out something that also helps workers just a little bit?
It's funny you mentioned Manchin because there's a lot we could say about that particular individual, right? But when it comes to the specific issue of coal miners and specifically a black lung, he's really good. That's really, it's his constituents. It behooves him, right? But he's been like a huge proponent of getting funding for the Black Lung Fund and looking after coal miners. Like, that is one thing, like, you can't really hit the guy on that. Everything else, that's a whole other several hour long conversation, right? But that is one thing. I'm also, man, this is wild. I mentioned it when we were chatting earlier. I'm going to DC next month to meet with a bunch of Congress people, including folks from his office, to talk about this crisis, about what can be done, and to see what they have to say. You know, it's going to be kind of weird. Actually, one thing on Friday, a number of senators, including Fetterman and Manchin and Kane and a couple other guys, put out a letter encouraging this is a little wonky, I'm sorry, Office of Management and Budget, which I mentioned in the article. There's a new rule that MSHA is trying to promulgate that will essentially limit the amount of silica exposure that workers can be exposed to on their shifts. And we've been waiting for this rule to be passed since the 70s, basically. And those senators just put out a letter being like, hey, what's hold up? You know, this has already been languishing in this office for twice as long as these types of regulations usually do. So as much as I'm not a person that has faith in the government being able to do things, specific issues like this, it seems like they might actually be a little bit helpful. So I'm crossing what fingers I have that something good comes of this.
Kim Kelly on the Hill. Okay.
Oh my God.
Kim Kelly on the Hill. I love it. I do. I mean, and Suba, please jump in anywhere. I wanted to ask you though about, like, I know that Biden has been taking some small steps administratively to rein in like the lack of safety in the coal industry. We'll talk about a little bit about that.
Yeah, so if I was in charge or made my way into the Oval Office, if I find my way there, if anyone knows a shortcut, let me know. So
sure, you just go and don't leave. Yeah.
Yeah, just bust in a little bit. I would love to see him declare a public health emergency. I don't really know what presidents do besides make everyone mad, but I'm sure he has the power to do something, right? Theoretically. But in
he'd be the last to know, but yes.
Bless his heart, as they say in the South. But in practical terms, there has been a really helpful shift in terms of the people who are running the MSHA office. Like, so in every presidential administration, they get to kick out everybody who's been working there, bring in their own guys. And that means that Biden was able to appoint a new head of MSHA, the Mine Safety and Health Administration. And that really matters because the last guy that Trump appointed was a former coal executive who spent all of his time trying to slash regulations. So not helpful at all. And going back to
a literal lump of coal with just like a little mustache.
Yeah,
And
just like a
glasses.
walking chunk of silica and a mustache, and but with like oh my god. And
Just a top
before
hat who's
that,
just sitting there
yeah,
the
I'm
whole
just
time.
thinking
Like,
of
he's
Mr.
been there for 4
Peanuts,
years.
like the monocle, while Trump was using coal miners as photo ops whenever he had a chance. But and then before that, during the Obama administration, people were trying to move towards this. Like Appalachian based Black lung advocacy groups have been pushing for this rule since 2011. And there was a little bit of movement, but essentially what folks who worked there told me is like Obama ran out of time. I guess he had a lot of things going on, a lot of people to bomb, who's to say. And by the time now we're in this Biden era, and he appointed a guy who is good and who cares. Chris
Right.
Williamson, who's a guy from West Virginia whose granddad was a coal miner, who has made combating black lung and this current upswing in the crisis like kind of his signature issue. Like when I talked to him last year, a month after he got appointed, he was already saying, we're working on this rule, we're rolling out this new silica enforcement initiative, we're doing an app. Like he's been on it. And I am cautiously optimistic that it'll have at least another year to get some shit done. And it's just so interesting to see how much it actually matters who is in power when it comes to these kind of bureaucratic positions that maybe we don't think about as often, but they actually have a big impact. Like that kind of shook
they actually
me.
can't be Mr. Peanut. They
Yeah, like that shook me a little bit because I try very hard to ignore what goes on in Washington at all times, but it turns out sometimes it matters.
It's like interesting because I've also lost so much faith in just our government's ability to do any goddamn thing. Like if you look at Biden, the way he handled the rail workers' safety concern, and then the trails, like the trains were literally derailing. Like it just couldn't have been more of a perfect example of, yeah, you messed up. And it's like, I mean, maybe I'm just not educated enough. Like, I don't understand, like, why he's like, okay, these trains have to move. And then I'm like, but why can you force the workers and not the companies? Like, I just didn't understand, like, why did it come down to the workers having to change instead of the companies? Is it just money? I'm like, you have to have that power. And it's just like, it's so depressing.
And being afraid of any financial fallout being blamed on him. As if, as if the companies aren't price gouging and doing it to themselves and creating artificial, inflation on their own damn selves. Anyway,
that's so annoying with them like raising the interest rate, so people with like credit card debt and shit get screwed. Meanwhile, they're like real estate people and people, literally CEOs on record going, oh, we're raising the prices because we have monopolies and there's nothing people can do and we can blame it on inflation. And so I guess that's like kind of why when I hear about unions doing stuff, it makes me a little bit hopeful, because I'm like, that's the only change I've literally seen be effective is like people on the ground saying enough.
Yeah.
Because it just like, I don't know, our political system is so goddamn broken.
I guess Kim, my last question for you is like, and I know this feels like, again, too partisan, but I am curious, what sense did you get for how people vote down there who you spoke to? Are they like Trump guys, or is obviously, I'm assuming that doesn't come up. That's not like a great, when you're trying to do an investigative piece on folks and profile them. But I am curious, like, do they blame Democrats? Do they understand where Democrats are coming from? Are they where does that fall in terms of, where do they fall in terms of politics in your observation?
It differs. It's definitely not a monolith. As much as West Virginia gets slapped with the Trump country brush, like sure, a lot of people there voted for him. A lot of people in New York and California did too. What are you gonna do? But it's not. And it's true. I already show up covered in tattoos and looking like a maniac, and I want people to trust me. So I'm not immediately like, so revolution, yes, no, how we feeling?
Yeah.
But and you try to find as much common ground as you can. But yeah, there's a lot of people that are conservative. And West Virginia is interesting because it's only recently become this kind of stronghold of red voters. The predominant political feeling that I come across when I talk to people in Appalachia is like, leave us alone, which I think is how most people feel about the government. Right. And coal as an industry kind of skews that too. Like people, like coal has dominated the region economically, socially, culturally for so long that people kind of feel like they need to hold on to it. There's not as many other options as we would hope. So
Right.
then it's seen to be threatening coal or threatening their livelihoods. We're not very into that. Like the whole Green New Deal, AOC, those are all like trigger words. Like nobody wants that, because no one is, the news sources that folks who oppose it that strongly are consuming don't tell them about any of the good stuff or any of the alternatives. Like the messaging that they're receiving is these people with their suits and their nice cars are coming down to destroy your life because you don't believe exactly the same thing that they do.
Totally.
And that's a potent message. But also some of the guys, and like these are coal miners from West Virginia that I had lunch with a couple weeks ago. They're like, we're on the same page. Like, they hate the cops. They hate the government. They hate the Republicans. They hate capitalism.
Right.
Like these are like, coal miners are smart. People just have different availabilities to
ergo they don't.
Yeah, like they're smart.
Ergo they
and
don't like Democrats either. Like
honestly, like especially the people I've become close to. Yeah, birds of a feather flock together. But it's amazing what centuries of exploitation extraction will do to the way people view capitalism and the government.
What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/Bitchuation Room.